Good evening. It's a wonderful new episode of your program, The Nexus, providing clarity. Today we have a very quite topical issue to discuss, an issue that borders on the development of every nation. Some people have posited that once you are able to solve this particular issue, all your businesses will thrive, you will have more things in the market, entrepreneurship will be the language of the day. What are we talking about? We are talking about electricity. Electricity generation started in Nigeria in 1896, even before independence. But the first electric utility company known as Nigerian Electricity Supply Company was established in 1929. By the year 2000, a state-owned monopoly, the National Electric Power Authority, popularly known as NEPA, that's what we still call them till today, was in charge of the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. But in 2005, when an act, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, was passed, we privatized the distribution and we privatized the distribution sector or arm of the NEPA, what we later called NEPA. And now we want to check what are our gains and our losses in this privatization. So in the studio today, we have our guest, someone who can truly speak and clarify, like our motto goes, providing clarity. We can clarify our gains and losses to us after the privatization of electricity in Nigeria. He is no other person than a former BPE Director of Electricity and Power, in person of Alhaji Ibrahim Gana Chiroma. Welcome to the Nexus studio, sir.
Thank you.
I'm very sure I'm going to have a very interesting day today, a very interesting episode, because I've heard a lot about my guest, and I'm sure you will give a testament to that fact. Sir, generally, what are our gains and losses in the privatization of electricity?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to come and share my knowledge about the power sector. In terms of the gains and losses, because in every process that you do, there will be successes, there will be failures. And I think in terms of the process of reforming the power sector that has been embarked upon by government, you will agree with me to a certain extent that it has been done with good intention, and the gains are multifarious and numerous, in the sense that we are the only country in the whole of Africa that has successfully transited the ownership of the generation distribution companies to the private sector. And the objective of actually doing that is to engender improvement in the performance of these companies, to ensure that we check the problems of lack of power 24/7, and so forth and so on. So basically, I would say one of the fundamental gains that has not fully crystallized per se is that now we have been able, despite all the obstacles and challenges, to transfer ownership to the private sector. And as you agree with me, the private sector are the key in terms of bringing about socio-economic development. Some of the drawbacks that we can attribute to that particular process is that we have not been able to reach the goals that we want per se.
Because
that is, I think, normal in any process that is complex and is very complicated.
Because you mentioned the issue of intentions, even though we know in the modern day era, people are not judged by intention, they are judged by the consequences of their actions.
Absolutely.
So later on, I'm very sure we'll be able to go to specific things when we come to that. So I'll go to my next question. Why was the power sector in Nigeria privatized? Because you mentioned now that we are the only one who has gone through this particular transition from the public in Africa to the private. So why was it privatized?
Well, basically, if you look at the history of the power sector, from the interesting history that you have narrated, you will discover that at a particular point in terms of the development of that state utility and monopoly, it has reached a cul-de-sac in terms of its ability to deliver to the Nigerian people. And that is one of the fundamental reasons why a decision was taken to privatize the sector. For example, you will discover that as of the 1990s, up to the point of the 1990s, Nigeria was just generating about 1,700 megawatts. The state utility has the apex of its capacity to deliver. In terms of the transmission sector, which is also part of the value chain, you find that it was also in a state of disrepair. It had not been able to improve. There hasn't been any major projects in terms of now improving transmission, which is also critical to the sector. In terms of the distribution sector, you discover that the challenges are mounting. It's something that it can be experienced, the daily experience of people whereby brownouts, that is blackouts, with the daily occurrences in the country, and so forth and so on. So from the time that the civilian government came into power at a certain point, they now decided that, look, one of the strategies that should be adapted is to now reform that particular sector. And they set up a committee that came out with a policy document in 2001. And in that policy document, it recommended that, look, let us set up a regulatory regime, let us unbundle the sector and eventually privatize it. And that is exactly what was done in terms of setting up, for instance, the regulator in 2005. And we eventually succeeded in privatizing the company between 2012 and 2013. That basically, to me, is the reason. Improve the performance of the power sector.
So it's still a matter of goals, objective, intentions also now.
Well, not really, because if you look at it critically, and that is what a lot of people don't know, if not because of the privatization of the generation segment of the sector, maybe the amount of power generated now would be lower than what you expected.
But I think
and let me illustrate. Let me please illustrate in terms of taking the generation sector of the country. We privatize 6 generation companies. And if you take, and I would just want to take one as an example of how the private sector involvement has led to an improvement in that particular sector. Take, for instance, Ughelli Power Plant. It's somewhere in the southern part of the country. At the time when we privatized Ughelli, it was just doing 200 megawatts. Now, and when we privatized Ughelli, we entered into a performance agreement with them that within the next 5 years, you should improve your generation capacity to 670 megawatts.
I think there's something...
I'm coming. At the time when before I left the BPE, and based on the studies that I have conducted, you discover that Ughelli Power Plant has been able to improve its generation capacity to 683 megawatts, which is an improvement of about 500 megawatts. The same applies to Ibrahim. At the time we privatized Ibrahim, they were just doing 600 megawatts. They have an installed capacity of 1,320 megawatts. As of today, Ibrahim Power Plant is doing 1,320 megawatts. What the public are seeing in terms of maybe lack of performance, which impacts directly on the public, well, that is the retail component of the business, is the distribution end.
That's where I am coming.
You get what I'm saying? And there are lots of factors why the distribution end is in this kind of quagmire.
Maybe because I think we need clarity. We need a bit of clarity here. In 2005, after the act was passed to law, after it was established, we had corporations that comprises of 18 successor companies that we were able to get from NEPA. We had 6 generation companies.
Absolutely.
But
and one transmission company.
6 generation companies, 11 distribution company, 1 transmission company.
Absolutely.
Created from NEPA.
Absolutely.
So now, with these 6 generation companies, the government is still telling us that they are the ones generating electricity. So how do we merge it? Is it that these generation companies are owned by the government?
No, I don't think government ever said they are the ones generating power. But rather, I am not aware, but rather you find that the majority of the ownership of these companies has been transferred to the private sector. There are 1 or 2 where government is still
owns some.
Like, for instance, if you take Ibrahim that I gave an example, the private sector owns 75%. Government just about has the remaining percentage.
25.
About that. If you take Geregu Power Plant, which was privatized also in 2013, handed over to the private sector also in 1st November 2013, you find that at the time when we handed over that company to the co-investor, it was just doing about 200 or 300 megawatts. Now they do their full capacity of 450 megawatts. There is no government ownership in that particular company. So you find that it's only in the NIPP power plants, which have not been privatized, which have been built by the resources of the state governments, the local governments,
And the federal government.
that is still owned by the federal government. They
And
have a
what
capacity.
percentage of the entire generation companies?
Well, they have the capacity to generate about 4,500 megawatts.
Which is more than half of what we generate.
Yeah, but those companies, as of now, because of the fact that majority of them have not been able to produce or generate at their optimum capacity, they are not generating to that level that you can see any major impact. And this is because of also a lot of legion of crises and problems that are associated to the power sector.
That you will help to unravel here today.
Well, I hope so, because it's a very complicated topic and it's a very emotional topic.
We know you can handle complicated stuff. So I'm very sure you will help us to unwrap some of the wrapped things there.
Yes.
So in one word, in a statement, we can say, even the generation that the government is celebrating, they just have just a quota, not the full
It doesn't matter per se, because what is the role of government per se in the 21st century?
Yes.
What is the role of government? The role of government is to actually create an enabling environment for business to strive, to provide security. Government, if they provide that enabling environment, then the private sector takes over. I don't see any problem in that. Rather, what is happening now is the current government is working hard to see to it that these NIPP power plants that have been built, over the years are now transferred gradually to the private sector. And that is what the BPE, my former employers, are doing.
But maybe before I now go to my other questions, yes. Since you mentioned trying to transfer even some that are still in the hands of the government now to the private sector.
Yeah.
The president, the license of this our discourse elapsed this December, if I'm correct.
I'm not aware of that.
I'm very sure it elapsed this December, and yet the license has not been renewed. And we have some gestures, some conjectures saying the government might not renew. And here you are hoping that even the one with the government is going back to the private sector.
I don't think it's a licensing issue, because I don't think any licenses have elapsed. Rather, it's an issue of how do you now work together and make sure that the distribution end of the business, which is the major sector of the power sector, that everybody feels we now work together and improve its performance. And I'm happy to announce here that when the current government came into power, they now sat down together with national and international stakeholders, and also major government ministerial agencies, and they came up what is referred to now in the sector a power sector recovery plan. And in that power sector recovery plan, they have come up with a process in terms of how do you improve the performances of the distribution end of the business. As of 2 days ago, the regulator released a regulation called the Power Improvement Plan, whereby each distribution company is to come up with a plan in terms of how do you intend, for instance, to meter your customers? How do you intend to improve the performances of your transformers? How do you intend to improve the performance of the lines in the sector? How do you make sure that this light that we see remains on 24/7?
We are still planning?
Yes, because you see, the decay of the sector took about 50 years. You don't expect it to be resolved in 5 years. It's not possible. The decay in this sector, and if you look at the colossal amount of investment that is required, you need a colossal investment of billions of dollars to make sure that you change this sector. Let me give an example. We took the case study of India, the New Delhi model, as an example of what we want to aspire for the Nigerian distribution sector. In the New Delhi model, you discover that when the investor took over that particular distribution company, all the symptoms of inefficiency and the development, lack of collection of power, wires in a haphazard manner, total corruption of even the utility company were present in the Indian example. But what they did is that within a period of 9 to 11 years, they have been able to reduce the inefficiency of the system in terms of the losses, in terms of collections, in terms of the commercial aspect, and in terms of the technical aspects, from 53% to 9%. Now, you find that the New Delhi Distribution Company is one of the most efficient companies in the world.
So,
And let me finish. And that is the kind of example that we want to, or the model that we want for. But it took them 10 to 13 years to arrive where they are. In Nigeria, because we are a country that is full of energy, I'll put it in that manner.
Just to be polite.
Yeah, people, but it's good to be polite, I think, especially in this area of Ramadan. You know, people expect things to be done in a jiffy, but you don't blame them. You don't blame them. Because I think what Nigerians want to see is improvement. What Nigerians want to see is development.
Betterment.
And I think that is now the responsibility of the actors in the private sector and in the public sector.
Aha. Now you give a percentage from New Delhi, the capital of India,
Yeah.
that they were able to move from 53%
In terms of the losses,
in terms of their losses
to about 9%.
9%,
which is
within the span of 11 years.
Yeah.
Now we've had like close to 5 years,
Yeah.
like you mentioned.
Yeah.
What is your own rating?
I think with the way that
And are we starting from 100%?
No. I think that from the way that there is now unity of purpose between the regulatory agency, that is NERC, between the Bureau of Public Enterprises, and then also the operators of the distribution companies. I want to estimate that within a period of 2 years, we should start seeing improvements in terms of the plans that are going to be put on the ground from now. Because these plans are plans that are realistic plans that are supposed, and they have already started.
They are pragmatic.
And they are pragmatic, and they have already started planning. You get what I'm saying? And what some of the features of these plans, I think, are very straightforward. The discourse are being mandated to tell the regulator, how are you going to improve, for example, your problems associated to the constraints that you experience, that power does not reach the different nooks and crannies of your license area. And this is a technical and commercial issue, that they are supposed to come up with a plan that will be able to do that. How many meters are you going to
produce,
install, for example, in the network? And how many meters will be installed through the map regulation that are just coming, so that you now avoid this scenario of now having estimated billing, and people will now have their correct bills given to them, and it will be prepaid meters, and they will be smart. You get what I'm saying? Then also,
and I think
then also there will be improvement in terms of it to be health and safety, which people tend to forget. In terms of now having naked wares all over the place, in terms of now ensuring that transformers are kept in a manner whereby they don't have access to people, and so forth and so on.
I think because the way you've been talking, it seems as if the discourse are extremely sincere. But to me, I've heard of people, even in my own situation, where when they give you this estimated bill, they wait till after 3, 4, 5, 6 months, even before bringing you just one bill. And the bill becomes accumulated, and the money becomes it comes in bulk that you suffer before you can pay.
Yeah.
So to me, I do not see the sincerity. If you're having estimated bill, why don't they bring it monthly? Because I also met with a business owner on Saturday, and he mentioned that now he gets lots of light now. He has very good light, but they've not given him a bill since the past 4 months. And he's scared that when the bill will be coming, it will be something he cannot afford.
Yeah.
So to me, I do not see the level of sincerity.
I never spoke about sincerity here. I was just explaining, the issues to do with the current plans in terms of how the current processes are being worked out to improve the sector based on what I am aware of. The issue of insincerity, I think, is a two-way process. There is insincerity quite all right among some of the workers of the distribution company, which is normal in any given setup in this country. There is also insincerity on the part of some of the customers.
That's true. It takes two to tango.
So it's a two-way process. But it is still the responsibility of the distribution company to eliminate insincerity among its workers to zero tolerance level. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
It is their goal, it's their responsibility.
I'm very sure
And-
some of them now, they are listening.
And they have to actually, because I was recently in a forum where I gave a motivational paper in a distribution company to the workers, and this matter actually featured. And what did we conclude? We concluded that the worker that is in the grassroots, that is at the retail level of
That
the
are dealing with the customers
that is
directly.
dealing with the customer on a daily basis,
Yes, sir.
is the one that is responsible for being honest and sincere,
The image.
and he gives a positive image to the company. On the other hand, also, in the course of the discussion, we had instances of whereby in a particular part in a major urban center, which I will not mention, you find that the whole community in that area will start the process of bypassing their meters by 1 o'clock in the night.
It's something, it's a collective thing.
1 o'clock in the night. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So it's a two-way process
It takes
of
two to tango.
accountability, of transparency, of putting stringent managerial structures to check this problem. And that is why I said, even though you have this problem from the customers, it is still the responsibility of the disco to check this problem. And that is why, for example, I know in some of the discos, they have zero tolerance for insincerity. If you are found out involved in
I
any
think it's better for us to celebrate them if you can be more specific.
Well,
Since we are not saying something negative.
Well, I know that, for instance, in Abuja disco, for example, if you are found to be involved in any act of fraud, you are immediately even dismissed from work.
I'm really interested in what you are unleashing, but we have to go on a break. Wait, and we will be back. The Nexus, providing clarity.
حي على
Brothers and sisters in Islam, this is a call for you to join us in expanding the An-Nur Masjid. Rest assured that whatever you give for the sake of Allah, He will replace it in multiple folds. To support this expansion, you can donate to these account numbers. Or call the DG International Center for Islamic Culture and Education on this number.
Thank you very much. Welcome back to the Nexus, providing clarity. I hope you will agree with me that Alhaji Ibrahim Gana, a former director, PBE, former director of Electricity and Power, has been able to unmask some of the masked things in the electricity sector. So we're just trying to round it out here to some extent in asking, since we've been dealing with problems and the connections and the links to these problems, why don't we deal with the probable solutions? And I'm very sure this particular episode will get to those people in the sector and they will be able to seek for betterment from what he's going to say with his experience. So, sir, what are the probable solutions? What we want, we do not want excuses. We do not want them to keep telling us we have a plan, we have this, we have that.
I agree.
Our appetite for that is quenched already.
I agree.
So we are going to what can be done so that I do not need to buy electricity, because I've been to some PHCN offices where you even see them themselves using generator. So this makes us somehow perplexed that the hope is lost.
Yeah.
Do you think their hope is lost? And if their hope is not lost, what do you think they can do so that we can have 24/7 electricity in Nigeria?
I personally think that the solutions are very simple. It is not rocket science. First of all, it requires political will.
From the government.
Political will on the part of the federal government to now come up with a clear body that will coordinate the deliverable of power in this country. Because you see, the issue of delivering 24/7 power entails the involvement of so many agencies who are all working on their own.
Separately.
Generally speaking, when agencies are created, everybody has a mandate, so everybody works towards his mandate. But you need to have a pivotal body that will now coordinate those agencies together so that they will now have a perspective and they will say, okay, we want to eliminate and resolve and deliver X amount of generation of power between now, from this point to this point. And this is the amount of resources that we need to do it. And this amount of personnel that we need to do it. And these are the agents that will be in the forefront of doing that. And I have written...
So we need an agency for coordination.
Yeah, ad hoc. And I have recommended, and I will say it here, that first of all, the president should be the first political champion for the sector. And when I say political champion, I mean it will be within his radar. And they should set up immediately a power sector recovery committee chaired by the vice president, with all these key agencies involved, with representation of the private sector, and they now drive the deliverable of power in this country. If it's done from that perspective, I assure you within the shortest possible time, we'll be able to see improvements in the power sector. Because what are we talking about? When you look at it from the point of view of generation, for example, we have the problem of lack of gas being supplied sufficiently to some of the power plants. A power plant like Ibrahim that can do 1,320 megawatts is constrained to do that because it just gets enough gas to do 500 megawatts. Nigeria, for God's sake, is a gas-producing country, the 6th largest oil-producing country in the world. Why can't we supply gas to these power plants? It needs a concerted effort to do that. And if you sit down and you plan properly, it can do that. If you take, for example, the transmission company of Nigeria, it is constrained. 2 days ago, there was a system collapse in this country, total darkness in this country. And the reason why is because of the simple fact that you have an infrastructure that is aged. You need colossal investment into that sector. You need to come up with a perspective that will attract private sector investment into that sector. As of the last count, if you want to improve transmission in this country, between now and 2020, you need a colossal investment of $9 billion. That can only be generated if there is harmony and unity of purpose between the public and private sector.
So what we need is just $9 billion.
About to just improve the sector so that it cannot eliminate all its constraints. And that is not easy to generate because there are lots of other sectors of the economy that are competing for resources.
Security,
if you can now
education.
dump this on the private sector as we've done in Brazil, as done in Peru, as done in Chile, where in the 80s and 90s they brought in the private sector to now invest in the transmission network, you find that there was colossal improvement. In the case of the distribution companies, implement to the letter the power sector recovery plan. Implement to the letter, enforce it on the distribution companies. Come up with a plan as now been done between the BPE and NERC. And I'm sure, inshallah, God willing, it will happen, whereby you now ensure that these companies are asked to now perform and you capture it in a revised performance agreement. I assure you that if this is done and you now coordinate this thing very well, there will be improvement in the power sector of this country. And that's why I said to myself, it's very simple, it's straightforward. It just needs political will. And that is how it was done in other parts of the world.
So you are saying the political will in this administration is not enough?
I'm saying the political will to make sure that we improve power
is not enough.
It's not enough. It needs to be done in a manner whereby it is robust,
with all sense of seriousness.
And with all sense of seriousness. You cannot just leave the issue of power to a line ministry. It is an interagency affair.
Aha. And since the president is planning to reshuffle his cabinet, would you say the Ministry of Power should be a separate ministry, not combined with the Ministry of Work and Housing?
I think so. To be honest, I think so. Because even power itself is a big challenge. Power itself will turn this your young black hair into white in 6 months.
We can see what it's doing to the Minister of
Exactly.
Power. So I hope the people, the president himself, I hope you watch the Nexus to take the advice of Alhaji Ibrahim Babangana, that it's better when the power is solely the responsibility of everyone, not the responsibility of just one person. And to put power with works on housing might be detrimental to our
I think it
focus.
should be removed. And I also want to add that if you set up that committee, the BPE, the Bureau of Public Enterprises, under the current Director General, should be the secretariat of that particular committee. Because it's BPE that midwives this particular process. And BPE has the capacity to...
Do you understand it better?
Well, not better. At least, I don't want to arrogate that to us. But rather, you see, we are the agency that drove the reform. From the time that it started in 2001 to date. So there is capacity to now ensure that that particular committee succeeds. And the DG is in a great position to really be the secretary of that particular committee. That I had advocated when I was working in BP, and I will continue to advocate that because I think that is the roadmap towards resolving even the issues in this sector.
I think before I leave the issue of electricity to come to something you are very passionate about, are there some lines in the contract that you think the public should know about, the privatization contract? Because we've heard a lot of rumors, why the license is still on, you cannot evoke the license and some other things. Do we have lines in the contract that you think that the public should know about?
Well, I don't know, but you see, what we tried to do, let me just relate the question to what we tried to do in terms of the contracts. What we did was to now try to establish a private sector-driven electricity, setup, and entailed about 13 contracts. You had some contracts that were meant to now drive the privatization. You had some contracts that were supposed to supply gas and other things to the sector. You had some contracts that were meant to now ensure that there is connectivity between the transmission company and the discos and the gencos. So this queue of contracts actually is supposed to govern the relationship between all the actors in the sector. And you had, for instance, contracts that were executed by the distribution company, vesting contracts, and the PPS, very complicated process. But you see, when you are now moving towards this kind of industry, it's contractual based. And the objective is to make sure that these contracts are activated and they work. That is what, because when these contracts are, if they're activated and they work, you find that then it means that the sector has improved.
Yes.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that every actor in that sector will now carry its obligations according to the contractual outline. You get what I'm saying?
Yes,
of these contracts. But because of the aspects to do with the challenges that have been faced in the sector, you find that the contract activation has not been done in the manner that is expected. So we hope that with now the improvements that are being brought into the sector, in terms of now improved efficiencies and so forth and so on, that they are now compelling the actors to do, there is every possibility that now you can now activate these contracts. Because at the end of the day, if these contracts are activated, it will be in the interest of every person.
I think we will be rounding off this particular segment. But before I round off this particular segment, I should tell our government, in pragmatism as championed by CSPS, is of the opinion that whatever that works in practice is what is meaningful. So whatever you have on the paper and we do not see it transmodify into something we enjoy, it is actually meaningless. So I hope you've been able to gather some advice from our guest, Alhaji Ibrahim Babangana, on what to do in the electricity sector. So we'll be moving away from this now and going to something he is extremely enthused about. We'll be back after this break. Thank you.
Brothers and sisters in Islam, this is a call for you to join us in expanding the An-Nur Masjid. Rest assured that whatever you give for the sake of Allah, He will replace it in multiple folds. To support this expansion, you can donate to these account numbers. Or call the DG International Center for Islamic Culture and Education on this number.
Welcome back to the Nexus Providing Clarity. I hope you've been able to get or catch away with substantial information from the former BPA Director of Electricity and Power. We'll be moving from that because like we've introduced him former. So we are going to what he's really doing now, which is the youth development. So what brought your interest in trying to see that the youth seek towards betterment, have a better future? What brought about the alacrity, the willingness to equip the youth with betterment?
Well, because if you look at it, the majority of the populace now in this country can be categorized as the young.
Even the old, they don't want to be called old.
And that they are the catalyst for the development of every society. And I think it is our responsibility, with all the experience that we have gained in the public sector, to now try to help and assist in motivating our youth in the right direction. Because what I have observed is that I had worked for 35 years to be where I am today. I have struggled to be where I am today. And what I think I have observed is there's this general notion that you can become what you want overnight. It entails a lot of hard work. It entails a lot of training. It entails a lot of commitment. And it entails a lot of being passionate about what you are doing. And that is why I believe that we need to focus on this important category of our society, because they are the ones also who are going to take over from us. And if we give them the right vibes, we give them the right values, which is very essential, they will be able to now maybe even take over from us and improve from where we have failed.
And give us a better Nigeria.
Sure, definitely.
Let me go to a more pragmatic question now. You've said the other time that at the time you went to deliver a motivational talk, according to someone like Lisa Nichols, he said our talks range from informational, inspirational, motivational, and transformational. Do you have a mentorship platform? Not just going to a place to just dash out these motivations. Do you have a mentorship platform where people can come to seek for betterment, where you can put people under your tutelage, in short?
I don't, but I have one or two activities that I can consider youth-related that I am doing.
Yes, sir.
For example, I'm involved in a private sector mentoring program. I've been approached by somebody, and he has asked me, please, he wants me to assist in mentoring from my experience, people that have issues and that they want to discuss in terms of their startups and other things like that. And I've agreed to do that, and I'm doing that as part of community service. Number two, we have started, before I left the BPE, we have started a project in terms of trying to establish an open university in my hometown, an outlet for an open university in my hometown. We have registered the NGO. We are just about to now move into the sector of now trying to, mobilize the community so that we can now construct that open university, because we have discovered that 80% of graduates, of potential graduates from Yobe State, come from my area, Potiskum.
80%? About
80%. And only about maybe 20 to 30% of that number gets into university. So we said, if we are able to now, under the auspices actually of the Emir of Fika, if we're able to now establish that open university outlet, it will actually benefit the youth. And we are also thinking of targeting, as another service within that context, women, to see to it that our women at home that have the potential to study should now benefit from that particular outlet. So these are some of the things I'm doing in terms of when I talk about the fact that I'm interested in the development of our young ones,
Yes, sir.
and so forth and so on. And also, still, when it comes to some of these discussions and in forums that are available, anytime I'm invited, I'll make myself available and I'll relate my experience, because I have discovered that there is nothing like experience in terms of now mentoring. You don't buy experience in the marketplace. It is gained in your situationally, in terms of your working career or your business career. Some of us are working career. And you discover that we have learned a lot of values, a lot of ideas that are managerial in nature, that if you part to some of these young ones, it will inspire them. I recall that in my last talk that I did, I am very happy to state that one of the things I told them is that, look, you should not wait for your management to now go and tell you when to train the staff that are under you. Rather, the moment you leave here, you should go and do it as the team leader of that particular unit. And as God will have it, all of them did that. And I got 1 or 2 telephone calls after the discussion of somebody that had an issue that he wanted my clarity. And I advised him in terms of his workplace, this is what I think you should do. And he was very happy. So I think we should all, those of us that are in this kind of position, although it depends on the interest that you have,
Yes.
should actually be involved in this kind of activities.
In this mentorship.
In this mentorship.
It's a community service
Yeah.
thing. And like Jack Ma would say, once you clock 60, even 50, he said what you should be interested in is in training others.
Absolutely.
The young ones.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
at that time, you're even now, old age, we start taking some things you can no longer eat, you can no longer do this or that. So the only thing now is to replenish those that are just coming up.
Yep.
So before I come to your parting word for the youth, is there any way now, if I'm watching this program now and I'm interested in getting a mentorship section with you, in asking you a question, in seeking for a clarification, how do I contact you?
Through my telephone number, 08033001743.
Thank you very much. I hope you've gotten.
That's
Yes,
my
sir?
telephone number,
Yes, sir.
08033001743, and I will be willing to discuss whatever issue you have that is in your mind.
I doubt if I've seen someone this simple. Giving out his phone contact, some people will tell you, I won't pick your call or it's only WhatsApp. But you have a run-of-the-mill now to contact someone who can truly mentor you. And we thank you for that, sir. We thank you for that. Before I wrap up the program, I have a question for you. The youth, what do you think the youth should be most interested in now in this 21st century? With your experience working, maybe we have it in 2 ways.
Yeah.
For those that are seeking after career, like you mentioned, and for those that are seeking after entrepreneurship. What is your parting word? What is your parting statement for the two?
I think they should be very interested in acquiring skills. Skills that can be useful to them in the formal and informal sector. That is critical because we are in a knowledge-based
environment
century. And I'm telling you, even for me, the internet is a very viable source of information. There is nothing that you don't get on the internet, for example. And it's the responsibility of the person to actually improve his perspective in terms of the kind of skills that are available. Because it's only if you are skilled that you can do things for yourself and be gainfully employed. Without skills, and these skills are not just the so-called university degree that I'm talking about. It has gone beyond that. There are other forms of skill acquisition in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of IT skills. in terms of other forms of skills that
Public
you require,
speech skills.
well, that one is another one, that you need to. And then also, I also think that our youth should be patient. It's important for them to to persevere, not to be in a hurry. Because if you are in a hurry that you want to reach that target, you might crash land. And I also think that for you to succeed on the overall, you should be passionate in terms of what you are doing. If you're not passionate, you will not be able to succeed. These are some of the parting words that I can just, I would like to extend to
I
now.
think for me, I would just do a synopsis, or if you would allow me, a summary. Number one, he mentioned the issue of hard work. Number two, he mentioned the issue of productivity. Number three, skills acquisition in order to be productive. Number three, he mentioned the issue of believing that smallness is greatness, not being too ambitious. You can be ambitious in terms of your vision, but in terms of your goal, you bring them down. Thank you very much. It has been a very wonderful and impactful section with you here today. We believe when we invite you to our program next, you'll be here, sir.
Thank you. I would be, definitely.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir. This is the Nexus. As you've heard, I'm very sure you've enjoyed yourself. You've been able to know some new things. And I'm very sure you've gotten the contact. You can contact him, but please don't call him after 10. He'll be out there with his family. Thank you very much. This is your show, The Nexus, providing clarity. Thank you. I remain your host, Egboka Sahid. I will see you in our next episode. Thank you very much.